Hi everybody, welcome to this week's demonstration here on the beauty of pastel. I hope you have fun and learn something new today. For today's lesson, I want you to know that I don't have a specific reference photo, but I do have a thumbnail that you're going to see pop up in the right-hand corner on my easel. And that's really kind of what I'm going off of, is this really fun, imagined, colorful landscape. I hope you enjoy. Here's the painting demonstration for today. Make sure you look in that upper right-hand corner for the thumbnail I mentioned in the opening. This is a piece of UArt that I trimmed off of my large roll in my studio. I am using, it's 500 grit, and I've taped it all along the edges with regular masking tape. I am planning on doing an alcohol wash underpainting, and I am just sketching in very lightly. I know it's hard to see right now just because it's such a light cast on this piece of paper. I'm just very lightly sketching in my large shapes. I sketched a little path, the distant trees, and kind of the way that I'm thinking I want the clouds to be formed. Now I am gently layering in, scumbling in hard pastel. And actually the first one that I put on was regular charcoal because I really wanted the base. I want the base of this tree to be really dark because I'm planning on bringing the shadow sweeping down almost as if the sun is behind the tree. And so I want to push those shadows a little bit more. And since I'm making this tree up based on just experience in doing it, in painting trees, then I'm just kind of experimenting a little bit here, just bringing some light and shadow to this piece. I have layered in some black charcoal, some kind of dark fuchsia new pastel, a lighter new pastel that's on the violet side, but kind of a pinky violet. Also bringing in some cobalt blues into the base of the tree and some little clumpy areas around this little path that I'm kind of carving out right now. And also adding in that's a Rembrandt that I'm using right now, that orange. I like to use that an orange or a really deep ochre color, or even dark muted yellows for the kind of, I guess you could call it the ground color of the pastel. And that way, whenever I cover it up with other colors, it kind of looks like there's dirt peeking through. Much like my other videos, I am now using rubbing alcohol and just flicking and swishing that pigment around with this number 6 size acrylic fan brush. This is a synthetic fan brush that I really love. I just like the way it makes its own grasses, it makes its own little branches and twigs, helps my job when I'm applying the pastel layers, just not to have to work so hard to get that texture. As pastelists, we don't have the benefit of being able to apply thick paint or impasto styles to our canvases or our paper. And so we have to apply texture in our underpainting to just create that movement that we're used to seeing in beautiful landscape paintings. Now I'm cutting in general areas in the sky where I'm wanting some clouds to be, and I'm using very similar hues to what I have in my foreground. And that is something I tend to do quite a bit just to bring the color temperature together. And right now, this is all going to be washed in with alcohol as well. So I'm really just kind of blocking in very loosely and very lightly. I'm blocking in those values and those colors. Once again, just using that fan brush, flicking and blending it into the tree, trying to get this pastel to cover up this oatmeal color paper so we don't have to, 1, work so hard to cover it, or 2, waste a lot of pastel because pastels are expensive. This is one way to use less pastel, is to use an underpainting, because that way it's already covered and you can just use a very, very light touch. Now what I'm doing is I'm refining the top part of that tree, because whenever I swished in that pastel or that alcohol layer and the clouds, that kind of violet above that tree, I thought we kind of lost that edge of that tree, and I just really wanted that to be more apparent. So I put in a little bit more of this dark fuchsia color, and then just reapplied the alcohol to just soften those edges. I do want a soft edge at the top of the tree, but I also want it to be a little bit more value contrast. Magic of video editing. Now the support is dry, and I am redefining the values of the base of that tree and these little clumps of grasses, sweeping it down across the paper using a really light touch, just using the side and also using it up in an up and down motion to simulate branches and the trunks of the tree base. I like my tree bases to be pretty dark because I like the contrast. And this new pastel is just a beautiful, cool color, and it layers wonderfully with a lot of colors, but especially greens and violets. And so I really like to use it. This is a Terry Ludwig, very light purple that looks and blends beautifully, creates such a soft glow with the more coral that I put in the sky. Also picking up a similar value turquoise to also blend into the horizon line of the distant light. This is that same kind of light purple, it's kind of a pinky purple. Like I said, I wanted this tree to be a little bit side or backlit. And so this color, it just really creates this beautiful glow against the sky. It kind of simulates, when you're using values in this way, you'll notice that this is much lighter, but I'm kind of using it as a rim around the edge of the tree, because those leaves, if we were going to imagine that we could see every individual leaf on this tree, the edges of the tree are going to have more light passing through them, just because there are less leaves on the outskirts of a tree than there are in the interior of a tree. And on the interior of the tree, there's not as much light is going to reach it, so we're not going to have as many bright spots in the middle of a tree. And I really wanted this tree to be, really, our view of it is we're standing on this side of the tree looking towards this view. So on our side of the tree is going to be mostly in shadow. And so that's one reason why I'm using a lot of blues. I used a similar value blue at the very top of that tree that I did for that kind of violet new pastel. And I'm just kind of playing with these colors right now. This tutorial that I'm doing for you, I have never painted this scene before. This isn't one that I did a study on. This is kind of my study. And so right now I'm just really kind of trying to react and respond to the colors that I'm viewing. I'm adding a little bit of darker pink. This is a Rembrandt that I'm using that is just bridging the gap between that lighter upper part of the tree and the darker lower part of the tree, or the mid-level. And that's something I really love to do, which is just observing a color, observing a value, and especially if it's on the edge of another value, if you have a dark next to a light, what's between there? What is the middle value, and what can you choose that would just help bridge those two values together, instead of it always being such a harsh value shift. You can have harsh value shifts, those especially draw the eye, but those are usually reserved for more like your final touches, a little bright yellow flower against a really dark base of a tree. Those things really draw the eye because they stand out so much. But when you're not really wanting, like this back side of the tree really isn't my focal point, and so those areas can be softer shifts of color and value. I'm covering up using the same colors that I used in the underpainting, just to cut in. This is kind of negative painting. If you're not familiar with negative painting, that's to where you have kind of a swash of color and you are carving out the negative shape. So I love to paint clouds this way. Instead of painting the cloud, I paint the sky around the cloud. And that's one reason why I love to use peaches and pinks as a base, because that becomes my cloud color. And then I can cut in the blue sky or gray or very light colors around the clouds and create clouds that way. I think that's a fun way to make clouds. Now what I'm doing is I'm just adding some sort of sky holes. This is a much darker blue. Of course, you guys, you're artists, you know about sky holes and how whenever you're choosing to a color value for a sky hole, you choose a darker color than what you've painted in the sky. That's mostly so we don't look like we've hung Christmas ornaments on our tree. And also because when you're we're painting a 3D object in 2D. And so we have to simulate that this tree has form. It's not just flat. It has a front side and a back side. And when we're looking through the tree into the distant sky, we're looking through shadow of that the tree is casting. And so that those areas would be darker. If you are worried about making sky holes, put down a color gently, step away and squint. And if when you squint down, if that sky hole still stands out too much, then it's too light. You need to darken it down to where when you squint down or take it in black and white, then that value, those two values, the sky hole and the tree value, are basically the same value. So it kind of mushes together. That's one way to do it to where they're more believable. I am just adding some texture and color into the grasses on this foreground side of the tree, using blues that are similar to what I have in the sky. And this is just simulating these shadows, and I'm not really trying at this point to make it look like grass. I am that gold that I'm putting on right now. That's also new pastel. This is a new pastel painting. And I am sweeping it up and down. They're such linear pastels that they work really well for creating grass effects. Also just I'm kind of working all over right now. I'm going back and forth with, just worked on the sky a little bit. Now I'm working on this little pathway, thinking, okay, maybe there's some little grasses that have grown in the center of this little road. Using some peach colors similar to what's in the sky, carving out that little pathway, using very cool colors since we're on the back side of this tree in these shadows. I'm really just trying to keep the color and the value shifts consistent. Being pretty careful right here. And I think I actually work on this path quite a while. I want to get it right because this is the entrance. This is how people are going to enter my painting. I want it to be believable. And I realized in this video, in this edit that you're watching, it seems like I'm picking up pastels and laying them on really, really quickly. That's actually because I edited out all the blank spots of me just standing there, really trying to figure out what next to pick up, because I didn't choose my palette before I did this piece. I knew the color scheme roughly that I wanted to do, but I didn't have tray set out for myself. So I actually probably edited out half an hour of just me standing. Right now, adding some golden touches because I want to add some light. I have my shadows going on. I've almost finished the sky, almost finished the tree. Now I want to add a little bit of warmth. I have a lot of coolness going on, especially in the foreground, but I want to add some warmth to the foreground so it will read well with the distance. Cutting in some harder edges where there's sunlight streaming through those grasses, really taking a step back. I keep saying that, using a real hard edge right there at that distant tip of where that path leads around that tree that draws the eye. Since that's a really hard edge against a softer grassy area in your landscape, that draws the eye into the center and that sunlit area that I'm wanting to create. Working on that distant field that's all lit up with the sun, adding some cool violets to the shadow area on my path. Just really taking my time here, adding some blue shadows into the base of that tree. Now I'm going to add some warm greens, just a touch of them. There's some they're not really sky holes, but they are lighter areas where in that tree where, there's a little sun peeking out. I'm going to add some warm green to that rim of that tree because that's really what I want the focal point to be. I'm wanting the focal point to be kind of a circle around where that path is, where that hard edge is, and the base of that tree, kind of if you were to imagine a circle up to about that first cloud formation. That's kind of where I'm thinking I want the focal point to be. And so those areas are where I'm going to have the most variation in edge. And also I'm going to add quite a bit of light over there. In just a second, you'll see. Really thinking about where would some trunks be? Where would it go, ebb and flow in and out of this tree? Adding some darker darks along the edge of that path. That's kind of where I want people to look. Sweeping that down, creating the form of this imaginary landscape. There's a lot of adjustment that goes on, even if you've done the very most perfect thumbnail in the world or really thought about your composition. Most things are experiments, especially if, like in this case where I hadn't done a study before of this piece. I'm experimenting with color and trying new ideas out. Something pops into my head and I think, oh, I'll try that. If it doesn't work, pastel is so forgiving. You can just either brush it off. If you have enough tooth left in your paper, you just cover it up. Don't worry about ever trying to paint the perfect every single mark from start to finish. The fun of it is when you've discovered something you haven't tried before. So I encourage you to, even if you turn your little iPhone around and record yourself and see it come together, it's pretty magical. So you can see that how much color I added to the edge of where I was telling you where I wanted that focal point to be. I added that green Terry Ludwig that I love so much, some golden. I'm using it. This is a white charcoal pencil just to kind of make a little mark that path is going to curve around and go off into that those distant trees. But this looks like a beautiful, nice walk on a beautiful warm day. Hi everybody, it's Bethany and I'm here in my studio. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you learned something today, I would love it if you would give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and also click that little notification bell so you can know whenever I have a new video coming up. If you'd also love to support this content coming out, I would love it if you would consider visiting my Patreon page. The link is below. I'm so excited to be bringing these lessons to you weekly, and I hope you're excited too. Bye.